Okay, I'd like to call our meeting to order, please, and thank you. This is the Conference Committee on SB 4 and AB 3. Welcome to our meeting. I'm Jim Bell. I'm the co-chair of the Conference Committee from the Senate, and welcome to our meeting. I think we'll begin with opening remarks, and I think that recent events have put road repair and maintenance at the top of our minds. And in July, we had some record storms that washed out a bridge on I-10 in the Southern California desert, closing our freeway down there. And earlier this month, floods, we saw what happened in South Carolina, badly damaging road systems in that area. 300 roads and bridges are still closed in South Carolina. We wish them well. But that's just an example of the kinds of things that could happen here. Just yesterday, large thunderstorms caused mudslides that closed I-5. And El Nino is threatening the state this winter. Obviously, we need to prepare our road and highway system for more extreme weather. Now, in his proclamation, the governor established the following purpose for our committee and the extraordinary session. Quote, to consider and act upon legislation necessary to enact pay-as-you-go permanent and sustainable funding to A, adequately and responsibly maintain and repair the state's transportation and other critical infrastructure, and B, improve the state's key trade corridors, and C, complement local efforts for repair and improvements of local transportation infrastructure. Now, it's with this purpose in mind that this conference committee is convened. In this meeting, I hope we will be able to continue the dialogue begun earlier this year to find solutions to a problem which impacts all Californians. There is widespread agreement that the problem is dire and the need for solutions is urgent. The agreement is the basis for what I hope will be a collaborative engagement of both parties, both houses, and both branches of government. Lots of ideas have been generated, and now it's time to sort through those ideas and figure out what is possible to do. We spent a lot of time on this issue, and failing to solve the problem only makes the solutions more expensive. Now, with that brief remarks, I'll turn it over to my sad co-chair, who had a very unhappy event yesterday in Los Angeles. Jimmy Gomez, Assembly Member, co-chair of our conference committee. Jimmy?
Thank you so much, Senator. And there was no joy in Mudville yesterday, for sure. But I always say at least we made it to the postseason again. But I'm glad we're not voting on anything, because I was in a mood to vote no on a lot of things today. But all kidding aside, as the Senator mentioned, recent events have kind of highlighted the need to take care of our transportation road infrastructure. However, this is not something that occurred recently. This is something that has been caused by years of kicking the can down the road, by putting off the repairs that we've needed to do for 10 and 20 years. And that is why we are here, is that we can no longer kick the can down the road. We have to deal with this problem in a fiscally responsible manner. Transportation and the road infrastructure is the backbone of our economy here in California. It's how we move goods and people throughout the entire state. It's how people get from home to work, how people pick up their children from school. This is something that we have to tackle now and not wait any longer. But the decisions are not easy. They're decisions that make people and elected officials uncomfortable. but it is our fiscal responsibility to make these hard decisions. I'm here with my colleagues. We have Assemblymember Kevin Mullen, Assemblymember Autumn Burke, Assemblymember Mr. Obernolte, as well as Assemblymember Melissa Melendez. We are a class of 12-year Assembly members, and as long as we are elected to office, if we have 10 years or even 11 years left, what you're going to see is that we can't kick the can down the road because the waiting is only going to make the problem more expensive. I'm committed to making sure that we tackle this problem and that we put up a package as soon as possible on the floor of the Assembly for a vote.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member. The first, we're going to have some presentations, and we'll start with Secretary Brian Kelly and California Transportation Agency, Keely Bosler, Chief Deputy Director, Department of Finance, and Malcolm Doherty will join them, Director of Caltrans. So welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I welcome the opportunity and the invitation to discuss with all of you options for funding our important transportation improvements in California. And I welcome the opportunity to present a proposal that the administration originally put forward in August and made public in September. I have with me here today, as mentioned, Chief Deputy Director from the Department of Finance, Keely Bosler, and on my right, somebody you all know, the Director of Caltrans, Malcolm Doherty. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I've been asked to come and describe the administration's funding proposal that we put forward, and as I said, I'm pleased to do that. I also just want to point out for the members that we did put together a little background book about the proposal, and have made that available to the committee. The administration's funding proposal is a balance of new dedicated revenue to improve California's transportation system, coupled with reasonable reform and accountability measures to maximize efficiency out of the investments we make in the system. The proposal was developed after meetings and listening to all four caucuses on what each deemed important in formulating a lasting plan to improve transportation in this state. Some push for new revenue, others push harder for reforms. Our proposal acknowledges the desire and the need for both. The proposal reflects the following core principles. 1, a focus on fix-it-first priorities to target new revenues on the acute state and local deferred maintenance problem in California. Make investments 2, make investments in targeted areas to ensure California's long-term competitiveness, like the state's important trade corridors. 3, continue the state-local partnership to fund transportation improvements important to both the state and localities. 4, adopt specific performance measures and reporting requirements so policymakers and the public know exactly what investments will achieve, and that administrative agencies are held accountable for performance. 5, do not impact the precariously balanced general fund to invest in transportation. And 6, ensure new transportation revenues are dedicated solely to transportation purposes. As noted, our proposal is a balance: new dedicated transportation revenue and reasonable reforms. On the revenue side, the proposal would raise an estimated $37 billion over the next decade, an amount nearly double what was provided by Proposition 1B, passed by the voters in 2006, and at that time, the largest 10-year investment in transportation in California's history. The revenue is raised through the following actions. 1, a road improvement charge of $65 on all vehicles registered in California. 2, an end to the annual Board of Equalization adjustment to gasoline taxes, excise tax, and instead the setting of a 5-year average and indexing that set amount to inflation going forward. 3, an increase in the excise tax on diesel by 11 cents, thus equaling the state's rate with the federal rate. 4, a dedication of cap-and-trade revenue to public transit and low-carbon neighborhood street program. 5, expedition of the repayment of outstanding loans made from transportation accounts in the past, totaling about $879 million. And then 6, of course, funding generated from the road improvement charge and the gasoline and diesel excise tax would be constitutionally dedicated to transportation purposes under our proposal. The Department of Finance has estimated that for the average motorist in California, the proposal will cost about $85 per year, which translates into about $7 a month and less than 25 cents per day. These numbers prove to me something Ronald Reagan said in 1983 when he enacted a gas tax increase. The cost to the average motorist is small, but the benefit to the transportation system is immense. Our proposal dedicates new transportation revenue to the following purposes: 50% for state infrastructure priorities and 50% for local priorities. State revenues, estimated about $1.8 billion, would be dedicated to maintenance, rehabilitation, including improved flood control on state highways and bridges, and for investment in the state's trade corridors. Local share funding, also $1.8 billion, would be available to local governments for improvements to city and county roads, for public transit grants, and to continue the state-local partnership program. The administration's proposal also includes important and reasonable reform, efficiency, and accountability provisions, including all of the following. 1, specific performance measures and reporting requirements for Caltrans to inform the CTC, the legislature, and the public on its work toward improving the condition of the state highway and bridge assets. A 10-year extension of public-private partnership authority to utilize innovative financing to deliver infrastructure projects. Expanded innovative procurement authority for Caltrans to deliver projects faster. Increased staffing flexibility so Caltrans can use the right mix of state and consultant staff to deliver increased workload. Streamlined environmental review processes that include a limited CEQA exemption for repair and rehabilitation projects within existing right-of-way, expanded use of advanced mitigation like that pioneered in Orange County so Caltrans can work with natural resources partners to identify the most meaningful mitigation strategies early in the project delivery process and reduce late conflict and challenges. And then finally, the extension of a delegated authority California enjoyed from the federal government to perform the CEQA process and the NEPA process concurrently. That authority sunsets, and under this proposal we would extend that for another 10 years. Finally, as I mentioned, our proposal is both a statute and a proposed statute and a constitutional amendment to dedicate new transportation revenue to transportation purposes. In sum, the administration's proposal includes needed revenue and reasonable reform, crafted to bridge differences we observed between various proposals in the legislature, and to comprehensively and efficiently invest to improve California's transportation system. This issue has often been overcome by partisanship, and I think it's worthwhile to remind folks that, one, California is not alone in the challenge to find revenue to improve our transportation system. And I think it's worthwhile to point out that other states are acting, and they're acting in a bipartisan manner. 21 other states have enacted transportation funding plans for investment since 2012. Those states are governed by both Republicans and Democrats. Their collective action is a demonstration that investing in transportation should not be a partisan issue. Just as those states have acted to improve their systems, so should California to improve its state and local transportation assets. Mr. Chairman and members, I am very honored to be here today to work with all of you on this important issue, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll hear Keely's presentation next. Thank you. And then we'll open it up for questions from our committee members.
Good morning, Keely Bosler with the Department of Finance. And I don't have a formal presentation here today, but I'm really happy to answer any questions, and just here to emphasize the importance of transportation financing and additional investments in transportation financing, and also the structure that the governor has proposed for funding, and really the importance of the sustainable funding for these issues. Many of these issues, the deferred maintenance that has built up over time, are significant, and they really do require the dedication of an ongoing funding stream. And that's really the underpinning of the revenue sources that are chosen in this proposal. There's been some suggestion of utilizing general fund, and the caution there is that that would not be a sustainable solution for transportation. We currently project a $2.6 billion operating deficit by 2018-19 on the state's general fund. And so already, under our current projections of revenues and expenditures, there's going to be a lot of management that will have to be done on the general fund. So adding a new responsibility of transportation funding to that is just not sustainable over the long run. We'll mention that there is a dedication of some general fund resources, that's $879 million, that will be used to accelerate debt repayments for transportation. That will be funded by Proposition 2 debt payments in the proposal. Also, just a little bit about the precarious balance that the state currently continues to be in. While revenues have continued to be strong since the budget passed, this is a very good news for California. The economies, all of the major economic indicators continue to show growth in the California economy, which is a very good thing for the state's revenues. And we have seen a little over $750 million, or around $750 million in additional revenues, but I caution you that that's only one side of the overall budget picture. This fall, right now, our office and the entire state departments and all of the agencies are putting together the estimates of the expenditures as well. And you really have to take both the entitlement expenditure and other growth in state in other programs and look at that in addition to the growth in revenues. Just this last week, there's been some news about Medicare payments going up significantly. That issue alone could hit the state's general fund by $550 million general fund. So while $700 million sounds like a lot of money, we have equally large issues on the expenditure side that we'll have to manage through as well. But I'm happy to be here. It's an honor to be here, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I'd like to have our Caltrans director give us just a quick status on the I-5 situation, if he could.
I'd be more than happy to. Malcolm Doherty, Caltrans director. As many of you may know, there was a storm burst that came through that area and created a mudslide that impacted both northbound and southbound. There was about 500 feet of mud on northbound I-5 and about a half a mile of debris spread across southbound, and that's where any of the vehicles that were stuck in the mud were in that location. The vehicles have been removed at this time. There were no injuries, thankfully, and we continue to remove that debris with the help of some other agencies as well as the private sector. We brought on a contractor to assist. Most of the debris is removed. A lot of the cleanup is happening now with sweepers. I expect it to be open within the next few hours, both directions of I-5.
Okay, thank you. I think that's very important because we have the kind of weather changes we're having and the patterns with El Nino. These are the kinds of incidences that we're going to see quite a bit of over the next few years, I guess. I had a question. If you had, when you looked at the amount of money that we need to adequately take care of what I call the backlog of maintenance for local governments and for the state, when you look at that, what is the proper how many years does your plan, and what do you think is the number of years it will take to really tackle that problem and eliminate the deficit of maintenance for our local streets and our state highway systems?
Mr. Chairman, The approach that we took in putting our proposal together was, as you well know and has been discussed in prior hearings, both in the special session and the regular session, is there's no shortage of, quote, needs assessments that talk about what a multi-year need might be in transportation. And I've been working, if you include my time in the legislature and now my time in this position, 21 years in transportation, and the needs have always outpaced the revenues and the resources, and they always will. Our approach to this was to try to find a revenue package that could produce meaningful results on the transportation system. And so we tasked Caltrans with looking at things like, what is the condition of our pavement today? With concentrated investment, what can it be in 10 years? Really relative to the coming rain season and storms, what's the condition of the culverts under our roadways that need to be clear for water to pass cleanly and not cause any damage or flooding? Where are we today? Where can we be in 10 years? So what we've done is put together a package here that includes an annual investment of $1.6 billion annually in the first 10 years and then going forward. And we are willing, and it's articulated in the bill, to commit to what that means to specific improvements. So, for example, our pavement condition today, about 41%, is either a combination of distressed pavement or in need of preventative maintenance. Our charge and our commitment is in the next decade to get 90% of our pavement in good condition.
So you're really looking at 10 years.
10 years. Yeah, we've tried to put this together.
Wipeout storms.
Yeah, I mean, similarly to the approach taken, similarly to the approach taken in Proposition 1B, and prior to that, in the gas tax increase from 1994, things are sort of expressed in a 10-year horizon, and so we've taken that same tact. Here's the amount we had raised in 10 years. Here's several commitments on pavement condition, on bridge condition, on culvert condition that we in our bill are requiring Caltrans to first set. Work with the CTC and the legislature on other matrix that people may want to see solved, and then require annual reporting to the CTC, the legislature, and the public on how they're doing toward meeting those performance goals.
How about the local governments?
There's things in there too on that, but I want to make one other comment. If it's found the department is not meeting the performances, or the CTC determines they're not, the CTC can withhold funding for those purposes. So we have set up goals, set up metrics, and are willing to go through the process of reporting exactly how we're doing on that. On the local side, there's a similar process at the Commission with reporting on how they're doing on improving local streets and roads. They also are required under the bill to maintain a maintenance of effort in terms of dollars that they're now using for streets and roads, so that this new money is not replacing existing investments, but is supplemental to.
Okay. Co-Chair Gomez has a question.
So the plan that you present is about a $36 billion, $37 billion plan over 10 years, but the administration has pointed out a $57 billion backlog, and right now you're claiming that we'll get to 90% good condition on our roads. So just kind of want to know how you get there. Do you believe that the $57 billion is that overstated, or what's left out of the plan in order to get to 90% with $36 billion, even though there's $47 billion in backlog?
Yes, thank you for the question. The $57 billion figure is a reflection of the difference between the amount of revenue we spend annually today on something called the SHOP program, which is the State Highway Operations and Operations Performance Program. We spend $2.3 billion today on that, and if we were to achieve, good condition in all things, invest in roadside rest areas, do a number of things that are articulated in the SHOP plan that we share with the legislature every year, that difference between what's required, which is estimated at $8 billion, and what we're providing in this plan is $5.7 billion annually. So that's the difference in a given year. We think it's unlikely that we would pass a transportation funding plan through the legislature that would provide that much just for state assets. We recognize that there's a need for local things as well. There's a call for public transit dollars and other things as well. So what we've said is, what are the most important elements of the SHOP program? In our view, it's pavements, it's bridges, it's culverts, and what we've put together is a funding proposal that will allow us to get to levels of performance in each of those areas, and that's really what we put before you, and that's those are the numbers.
Thank you. We'll go to let's see, Assemblymember Mullen, and then Senator Leyva, Mr. Obernolte, and then Senator Cannell.
Thank you to the co-chairs for convening. Thank you both for the presentation, or all three of you rather, for the presentation. I guess my question was sort of along those same lines. Is this a big enough bite at the apple given the magnitude of the problem that we're all confronting? And you have touched on that. Let me just ask more specifically on an element here, which is the CEQA reform piece, which I'm intrigued by. What kinds of time savings could we realize if you were to look at sort of an average project, if you will, contemplated in the package? What does that mean in terms of crunching down timelines to expedite projects? There's lots of interest in my district in the 101 corridor on CEQA reform, or pardon me, on just crunching down timelines on improvements in that corridor. So what are we looking at in terms of CEQA reform? Can you describe that a little bit?
Sure. Let me first say generally on time savings on project delivery, our proposal has several elements. The CEQA element is one of them. We also are trying to learn from and take a page from Orange County, who's really pioneered the use of something called advanced mitigation, which would allows the transportation entity to work closely with resources entities and others on identifying mitigation, not just for one project, but for a suite of projects, perhaps in a single corridor, mitigating those on the front end in an agreeable way, and then reducing back-end challenges. Orange County, were they here testifying, they can give you the specifics, but I know that they've saved months and months on litigation and challenges on projects. So that's one. Secondly, the extension of our NEPA delegation so that California can perform CEQA and NEPA activities concurrently has saved something like a combined 132 months since we've had that delegation. Maybe it's even more than that. And so those two elements are also in the bill. With respect to the CEQA process, it's a limited exemption for maintenance and rehabilitation projects within an existing right-of-way and for changes to existing structures. And we think in those cases, the process would allow some expedition on public comment time and additional analysis needed. Because it's in the existing right-of-way, a lot of that analysis has already been done, and some of the changes that we're making are less impactful than if you're building a new lane or a new highway. And those things are outside of our CEQA exemption. So where you have new impacts, that would still be subject to, particularly outside of the existing right-of-way, that would be subject to the full CEQA process. Ours is a much more limited and targeted exemption, really where you're having less impact. In terms of the number of months, I'm looking to my colleague to the right here. Malcolm, any comment you want to make about that process?
I think I can put some specificity to it. As an example, when we took on the responsibility of making the environmental decision for NEPA, which is the federal environmental document, most of our documents are small in nature, and then the medium-sized environmental documents are called negative declarations, and then the large documents are environmental impact reports. On those documents, by taking on the delegation of NEPA, we've saved about 10 to 12 months on the medium-sized environmental documents, and then sometimes 20 to 24 months by taking on the larger-sized documents. By streamlining some of the permitting and the better coordination between state and federal agencies, as well as doing advanced mitigation, we think that we can add on to that savings to the tune of months and maybe up to a year of savings if we can do those things. So that's the context, or probably the magnitude of the opportunity for savings. Faster delivery, and then time is money. So those are the opportunities to what we can accomplish from doing that.
Okay, Senator Leyva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, there we go. Sorry, wrong house.